I was doing a documentary on another photographer in Kabul, and there was a bit of a commotion going on further down the street, and we thought, oh, let's just go and have a look and see what's going on down here. And as we wandered down, the tone of the group that we were photographing changed, and suddenly these young boys started picking up rocks, and then they started throwing stuff at us. And I just remember turning and running with Andrew and just telling myself, stay on your feet, stay on your feet, because I knew that if either of us had tripped over, they would have been on top of us. Thankfully, they managed to bundle us into these vehicles and get us out. There's something extremely visceral and exciting about operating under those conditions, and also my nature is I'm drawn to it.
Where did you learn to enjoy danger?
I think you're born with it. So this is Banks Peninsula, this is where I grew up, and that's Slavon's Bay out there on the other side. I had 9 cars by the time I was 18, and I'd only sold one of them. I was barred from every pub on Banks Peninsula before I was 18. I had such a reputation for being a fuckwit, actually. We rolled a car off the bank here, crashed my motorbike into here. I wrote my mum's car off here. Oh no, it got fixed, eh, Mum?
Yeah, it was Christmas Eve, 1992.
And what was it like for you learning these things constantly?
Oh, I was just relieved he survived, I always knew that if he survived, he would be great,
When Dad left, I inherited the 22 and the gin traps, so I kept on possum hunting. I could only carry 2 or 3 possums at a time because I was so little. But that physicality, running around these hills, climbing, walking, building things, that stuck with me my whole life. It's a pretty amazing way to grow up. I was down in Dad's brand new workshop and I made a flamethrower. There was a huge burn mark in the ceiling and there was smoke coming up through the carpet.
I think I've blocked a lot of it out, Jacob.
Jake caused you a bit of stress as a child, Louise?
Oh, yeah.
Don't be honest.
Oh, he was a kid, Kids do, don't they? Call us all. Call us all. He was always really lovely, though. Like he wasn't rude or anything. He was always very polite, which is, I guess, what saved his life.
I was a polite menace. First time I had a firearm pointed at me, well, I was 14 years old. So suddenly you're in Kabul and you've got someone walking up with an AK-47 putting it through the car window. That, having not been the first time that it happened, meant that I was able to deal with it more rationally, I think. I've never been able to apply myself to anything that bores me, but I was really driven to do as much as I could in my life. And school really got in the way of that.
School was a bit of a disaster, really. He had had so much physical freedom and then when he started school, and he had to sit still and...
It was deeply unpleasant. Well, the idea of just sitting in that one place, and because I wasn't academically that well, like mathematically, I can barely add and subtract. I remember my maths teacher once getting so angry, so frustrated, he dragged me out of the classroom by my hair. And I was just, I would have been 10 years old. And I think my education, my tertiary education, ended when I was 14. Peter's my uncle. When I left school at 14 and a half, gave me a job. Yes, he did. Yeah, I was very lucky, actually.
Everyone else I've ever had workings have been the same. They've taken a wee while to get the hang of it, but Jake just could do it. And also, you learned through the discipline that you achieved what you wanted.
I made dozens of these. It's a crocodile.
But most of them had legs.
I forgot to add their legs to this one.
That's why it's still here.
I would have been 16 when I came into town, Christchurch.
Boy racing.
I did a lot of that. I just remember looking around in the cells in Christchurch and realising that this was not my place. Like, if this is my future, it was absolutely not who I was. One of the films that I shot on my Super 8 camera got screened in Leicester Square in London, and sitting in the theatre watching something that I'd written and shot was the most extraordinary experience. And I walked out of there knowing that that's all I ever wanted to do, was to shoot pictures and to be able to show the world that I was experiencing to other people.
He is an artist, yes. He certainly has an eye for beauty, and I just see that he has empathy for people that he feels are being treated wrongly.
I think that being able to listen is one of the best skills that you can have as a cameraman. If you're not listening, you're not really able to illustrate someone's life. It's often really difficult, as often you're listening to enormous amounts of trauma.
Does it damage you in the short term? Do you not sleep?
Being in places like Afghanistan, maybe I was getting a bit jumpy after a couple of trips, but I think some of the stories I've told here in New Zealand have been a lot more traumatic. I was asked to come down 2 weeks after the earthquake to archive, to document the city as it was before it had been bulldozed. I never really had a real affinity with Christchurch. I couldn't wait to leave growing up, but had this real sadness looking around and seeing the city that I knew and realising that I didn't recognise any of it. And it looked like a war zone. It looked like places I'd been that had been through an enormous amount of conflict.
Kia ora mai anō, welcome to Native Affairs. Palestinian supporters call it a freedom flotilla. The Israeli government named it the terror flotilla.
I got a call from Māori Television saying they wanted to do a story on the Gaza blockade, which is a flotilla of boats, of vessels trying to break the Israeli blockade on Gaza. There were definitely risks attached to that. It was the year before the Israelis had boarded a vessel and shot, I think, 4 or 5 people. I already knew pretty early on that we were going to have to do some pretty drastic things to get those pictures off. If we get on this boat and we're in prison, our story's gone. Like, we're not going to get anything out from this. We have to work out how to get all the images off the boat. In the middle of the night, I was sleeping right up on top above the wheelhouse on this fishing boat, and all hell broke loose. Floodlights on the boat. There were 4 gunboats off this Israeli cruiser, came in, started boarding the boat. So I managed to film them tasing everybody, and the violence of that action trying to get into the wheelhouse. Yeah, it was pretty hectic. I managed to get a card out of the camera and hand it to Ruwani, and she was wrapping it in a cellophane, handed it back, and I swallowed the card. And so I actually had to ship the card out, and whilst in detention, and re-swallow it. And that was probably the hardest thing ever.
And the world saw the footage.
And the world saw the footage. I could never use the card again.
Why not?
It sounds terrible.